back to our podcast. I'm Sophia, and today we have an exciting topic to dive into: communication skills development. I'm joined by Mason. Hi, Mason.
Hi, Sophia. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. Communication is such a crucial skill, whether in personal life or professional settings.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. When we talk about communication skills, what do we mean exactly?
Good question. Communication skills encompass how effectively we convey our thoughts, ideas, and emotions to others. This can be through speaking, writing, or even nonverbal cues like body language and facial expressions.
Right, so let's break it down. One key aspect of effective communication is active listening. Have you ever heard of that term, Mason?
I have. Active listening means truly paying attention to the speaker without just waiting for your turn to talk. It involves giving your full focus, understanding the message, and responding thoughtfully.
Exactly. For instance, if someone is sharing a story, active listening would mean nodding in agreement, making eye contact, and maybe even paraphrasing what they said to show understanding.
That's a great point. It's not just about hearing the words, but understanding the emotions and intentions behind them. For example, if a friend says, "I'm feeling really overwhelmed at work," active listening would involve acknowledging their feelings and offering support.
Speaking of feelings, another important part of communication is empathy. It's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes and understanding their perspective.
Yes, empathy can really strengthen relationships. It helps us connect on a deeper level and shows that we care about others' experiences and feelings.
Moving on, let's talk about clear expression. This means articulating your thoughts in a way that is easy for others to understand. It involves using simple language, organizing your ideas, and being concise.
Absolutely. For example, if you're giving instructions, you should be clear and specific. Instead of saying, "Just fix it," you might say, "Please replace the broken part," and ensure everything is tightened properly.
That's a great example. And don't forget about nonverbal communication, the body language, gestures, and facial expressions that accompany our words.
Nonverbal cues can sometimes speak louder than words. For instance, if you're smiling and maintaining an open posture, it can make you seem more approachable and friendly.
Yes, and let's not overlook the importance of feedback. Giving and receiving feedback effectively can improve communication skills. Constructive feedback helps people grow and understand how their message is being received.
Definitely. When giving feedback, it's important to be specific and supportive. Instead of saying, "You need to improve," you might say, "I think you could improve by practicing more in this area."
And receiving feedback requires an open mind and willingness to learn. It's about listening without becoming defensive and using the feedback to make positive changes.
One more concept I'd like to touch on is cultural sensitivity. Understanding and respecting cultural differences can play a huge role in effective communication.
Absolutely. Different cultures have different norms and practices, and being aware of these can help avoid misunderstandings and foster better interactions.
So, to recap, effective communication involves active listening, empathy, clear expression, nonverbal communication, feedback, and cultural sensitivity.
That's right. It's a multifaceted skill that takes practice, but it's incredibly valuable in every aspect of life.
Now, we talked about the basics of communication skills. Today, we're diving deeper into practical strategies to improve these skills.
Exactly. So let's start with a practical strategy: assertiveness. What does being assertive mean, Mason?
Being assertive means expressing your thoughts, feelings, and needs directly and honestly, while also respecting others. It's about finding a balance between being too passive and too aggressive.
Right. For example, if you're at work and you have a concern about a project, being assertive would involve saying, "I'm concerned about the deadline for this project. Can we discuss how to ensure we meet it?"
Exactly. It's clear, respectful, and direct. Let's contrast that with being passive and aggressive. If you were passive, you might just avoid mentioning your concern and let the deadline slip. If you were aggressive, You might say something like, "This deadline is ridiculous. Why hasn't anyone done anything about it?"
Good examples. Assertiveness helps to prevent misunderstandings and resolve conflicts more effectively. Now, another important strategy is using open-ended questions. Why is that important?
Open-ended questions are questions that can't be answered with just a yes or no. They encourage the other person to provide more information and engage in a more meaningful conversation. For instance, instead of asking, "Did you like the movie?" you could ask, "What did you think about the movie?"
Great point. Open-ended questions help in getting more detailed responses and can lead to deeper discussions.
Another key aspect is giving compliments and showing appreciation. Compliments and appreciation can boost morale and strengthen relationships. For example, saying, "I really appreciate your help with this project," shows gratitude and recognition.
Yes, and it's important to be genuine. A sincere compliment can make someone feel valued and respected. For instance, "I admire the way you handled that meeting. Your input was really insightful."
Exactly. Now, let's talk about conflict resolution. Effective communication plays a big role in resolving conflicts. When you have a disagreement, it's important to focus on the issue, not the person.
Right. For example, instead of saying, "You always mess up," you might say, "I'm having trouble with how this task is being handled. Can we discuss a solution?"
That's a good approach. It keeps the conversation focused on finding a solution rather than placing blame. Also, be sure to use I statements. For example, "I feel frustrated when the deadlines are missed," rather than "You never meet deadlines."
Absolutely. I statements help express your feelings without sounding accusatory. Another important skill is feedback. Giving and receiving feedback effectively can really improve communication.
Yes, feedback should be constructive and specific. For example, instead of saying, "Your report needs work," you might say, "I think your report would be stronger if you included more data analysis in the results section."
And when receiving feedback, it's important to listen openly and without becoming defensive. You can say, "Thank you for the feedback. I'll work on those areas."
Another point is body language. Your nonverbal cues can say a lot about your level of engagement and openness. For instance, maintaining eye contact and nodding can show that you're actively listening.
Yes, and positive body language can make you appear more approachable and engaged. Conversely, crossed arms and avoiding eye contact might make you seem distant or uninterested.
Let's not forget about summarizing and paraphrasing. Summarizing means briefly restating what the other person has said to ensure understanding. For example, "So, if I understand correctly, you're saying that the project deadline is too tight."
Exactly. Paraphrasing can confirm that you've grasped the main points and give the other person a chance to clarify if needed.
Now, we covered some foundational strategies and practical tips. Today, we're going to dive into some real-life scenarios and how to apply these skills.
That sounds like a plan. Let's start with a common situation, making small talk. Small talk is often the first step in building rapport with someone. How do you approach small talk, Mason?
Small talk is all about engaging in casual conversation to break the ice. It's important to start with open-ended questions. For example, instead of asking, "Did you have a good weekend?" you might say, "What did you do over the weekend?"
Exactly. Open-ended questions encourage the other person to share more details. Another tip is to find common ground. If you discover a shared interest, it can make the conversation flow more naturally.
Absolutely. For instance, if you're at a networking event and you both enjoy hiking, you could say, "I noticed you mentioned hiking earlier. What's your favorite trail?"
That's a great way to connect. Now, let's talk about handling difficult conversations. Sometimes we need to address sensitive topics, like giving critical feedback or discussing a problem. How do you handle these situations?
Handling difficult conversations requires a careful approach. Start by staying calm and choosing your words carefully. Use I statements to express your feelings without sounding accusatory. For example, instead of saying, "You always interrupt me," you could say, "I feel frustrated when I'm interrupted during our meetings."
Right, and it's important to stay focused on the issue rather than attacking the person. Discuss the problem and suggest potential solutions. For example, I've noticed that our meetings often run over time. Could we work on keeping them more organized?
That's a constructive approach. Another tip is to practice active listening during these conversations. Show that you're listening by summarizing what the other person has said and asking clarifying questions.
Yes, summarizing helps ensure that you've understood the other person's perspective. For instance, so if I understand correctly, you're saying that you feel overwhelmed by the project deadline?
Exactly. Now, let's move on to networking. Networking is all about building professional relationships. When you're meeting new people, it's important to be approachable and open. How do you start a networking conversation?
Start with a friendly introduction. For example, "Hi, I'm Sophia. I work in marketing. What about you?" After the introduction, you can ask open-ended questions to learn more about the other person's work and interests.
And don't forget to follow up after your initial meeting. A simple email or message saying, "It was great meeting you at the event. I enjoyed our conversation about digital marketing. Let's stay in touch," can help build and maintain the connection.
Great tip! Now, let's talk about negotiation. Negotiating involves reaching an agreement that satisfies both parties. How do you approach negotiations?
Start by clearly stating your needs and understanding the other party's needs. Use active listening to grasp their position. Then, propose solutions that address both sides. For example, "I need a deadline extension to ensure quality. Can we agree on a new deadline that works for both of us?"
That's a good approach. Be open to compromise and willing to explore different options. Negotiation is about finding a middle ground where both parties feel satisfied.
Another important aspect is assertive communication. During negotiations, assertiveness helps you advocate for your needs while respecting the other party's position. Use clear and direct language to express your point of view.
Absolutely. And finally, let's touch on public speaking. Many people struggle with speaking in front of an audience. Do you have any tips for effective public speaking?
One key tip is to practice. The more you rehearse, the more confident you'll be. Also, organize your speech with a clear structure, an introduction, main points, and a conclusion.
Yes, and it's important to engage your audience. Make eye contact, use gestures, and vary your tone of voice to keep your listeners interested. For example, in conclusion, these strategies will help you develop strong communication skills and improve your professional relationships.
Another tip is to handle nervousness by taking deep breaths and focusing on your message rather than the audience's reaction.
Great advice! We've covered making small talk, handling difficult conversations, networking, negotiation, and public speaking.
Now, we're wrapping things up by discussing how to put all these strategies into practice.
Absolutely. Let's start by talking about effective meetings. Meetings are a common place where communication skills are crucial. What are some tips for making meetings more effective?
First, it's important to have a clear agenda. An agenda is a list of topics to be discussed. Sharing the agenda before the meeting helps everyone prepare. For example, here's the agenda for our meeting tomorrow. We'll cover project updates, budget review, and next steps.
Good point. During the meeting, ensure that everyone has a chance to contribute. Encourage participation by asking open-ended questions. For instance, what are your thoughts on the new project plan?
And be sure to summarize key points and action items at the end. This helps everyone remember what was discussed and what needs to be done next. You might say, to summarize, we agreed on the new deadline and the team members responsible for each task.
Excellent advice. Now, let's discuss cross-cultural communication. In a globalized world, we often interact with people from different cultures. What should we keep in mind?
When communicating across cultures, it's essential to be aware of cultural differences. For example, in some cultures, direct eye contact is a sign of confidence, while in others, it might be seen as rude. Being sensitive to these differences can prevent misunderstandings.
That's a great point. Also, avoid using slang or idiomatic expressions that might not be understood. Instead, use clear and simple language. For instance, instead of saying, "We're all set," you could say, "Everything is ready."
Another tip is to ask clarifying questions if you're unsure about something. For example, "Could you please explain what you mean by that term?" This helps ensure that you fully understand the other person's message.
Now, let's talk about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence involves understanding and managing your own emotions and recognizing the emotions of others. How can this enhance communication?
Emotional intelligence helps you respond appropriately in different situations. For example, if a colleague is frustrated, showing empathy and acknowledging their feelings can help diffuse tension. You might say, "I can see that you're upset about the delay. Let's discuss how we can address this issue."
Yes, empathy and emotional awareness are key to building strong relationships. Another important aspect is effective storytelling. Storytelling can make your communication more engaging and memorable.
Right. When using storytelling, structure your story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. For example, "Let me tell you about a time when our team faced a similar challenge. At first, we struggled, but then we came up with a solution that worked well for everyone."
Storytelling helps illustrate your points and makes your message more relatable. Now, let's discuss professional emails. Crafting effective emails is an important communication skill. What are some tips for writing professional emails?
Start with a clear subject line that reflects the content of your email. For example, "Project update, Q3 budget review." In the body, be concise and to the point. Use bullet points if you have several items to address, and end with a polite closing. For example, "Thank you for your attention to this matter. Best regards, Mason."
Good advice. Also, remember to proofread your emails before sending them. Check for grammar and spelling errors, and ensure that your message is clear and professional.
Let's not forget about networking events. When attending these events, have a few conversation starters ready. For example, "I read about your recent project on social media. How did that go?"
That's a great way to engage others and build connections. And remember to follow up after the event to maintain the relationship. A simple message like, "It was great meeting you at the conference. Let's stay in touch," can go a long way.
Finally, let's recap the key communication skills we've covered in this series: effective meetings, cross-cultural communication, emotional intelligence, storytelling, professional emails, and networking.
We hope these tips and strategies help you enhance your communication skills in various settings. Practice these skills, and you'll see improvement in your personal and professional interactions.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We've enjoyed exploring communication with you and hope you found the episodes valuable.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time.
Goodbye.